What's up, my dudes? And yes, I promise, I know that there's a terrain deformation system in MX Simulator. It surprises the living fuck out of me how many people still think that I think that there isn't even a terrain deformation system at all in this game. I don't know where people get that from, but just because I say that it doesn't have a very good terrain deformation system is not me saying that there isn't one at all. So, I don't know why there's that miscommunication between me and some people out there, but I swear every time I've even mentioned terrain deformation with MX Simulator, people say, well, Spencer, didn't you know that there's actually a terrain deformation system in there? Like, dog, I got it. like, please just listen to what I'm saying in my videos, homie. It ain't that hard to understand. But anyways, okay, so with MX Simulator's terrain deformation system, it is about as ghetto and basic of a terrain deformation system you could possibly put into a motocross game. It really is at the core of it, but there are some positive things to it, and there's some really negative things to it when you talk about how it's actually optimized and integrated into the game. There's almost so much negative to it that it just completely blows away any sort of positive aspects to it. It really is just a goof and a gaff kind of thing that you do in single player, and that's really all it is in this game. So I have it set on erode 40 right now, which is pretty standard for most people, I think, to have in this game, but we're just going to go through here a couple of corners. I picked a track that was a little bit more flat so that you could really see what it was doing, and a track that had a pretty basic ground decal, because if you get on those tracks that have those like pretty much pre-rutted up looking decals on a track, then you can't even hardly see the ruts at the very beginning anyways until you got them dug down quite a bit there. But I'm just going to run a couple laps and kind of see what it's going to do here and show you guys what it does, because it's a very different system than you would kind of think, like how Reflex is in some of those games. It is just very different in the way that it does it. For instance, like with MX Simulator, all you really have in this game is contact between your tires and the terrain itself, and you have a subtraction of terrain right where your tire went. And I know that sounds super basic, and it's like, duh, Spencer, that's what terrain deformation is, but you don't understand how basic it really is. Like, whenever I say that, that is all it is. With MX Simulator, the dirt doesn't actually move with the bike any. Like, there is no movement to the dirt like there kind of is in Reflex. Even though it may not exactly be like that in Reflex, there's something they put in Reflex that makes it feel like the dirt has a little bit of softness to it, like there's a little bit of movement when you ride in the dirt like it is in real life. But with MX Simulator, it is strictly just the tire contacting the terrain. That's all there is. There is no like movable dirt feeling to it. So that's what makes it so much different in that sense. And I think a lot of people may not understand that's how MX Simulator is. And the reason behind that is because it's such an old game. And I feel like that's really what limits this whole terrain deformation thing, is the fact that it's such an old engine. Like, it would almost need a complete overhaul of the game engine to actually make the terrain deformation like you think it would be. But let me actually restart it here to show you guys what it does. But you can set the erode to whatever level you want to. So like, let me just show you guys how to do that real quick. I'm probably going to completely erase the rut there, and that's one thing to explain as well, is if you exit out of the game, it will completely scratch any sort of terrain deformation you had on there. And also, there's something in there where if you like go to enough of other tracks, then it erases your terrain deformation on that one track, even if you didn't leave the game. I don't know the exact like actual coding behind all that, like when it erases it, but just be careful if you're trying to like, you know, do an edit, or you're trying to get a screenshot of like a rutted up terrain deformation thing. If you exit the game or you go to some different tracks, it might erase it without you realizing it. So you really do have to like stay right there on that track if you want to keep your terrain deformation. But okay, let me show you guys something real quick. All you got to do is come in here, do a little right click action on the your actual MX Simulator shortcut here, and just go down to properties. So what you're doing is basically just the exact same thing you put in to get the editor in the game. You're doing the same thing, but you're just putting in erode, and then you put in whatever number. Make sure you got a space between that, or it's probably not going to work. That's how coding is. It's got to be perfect. So you can put any number in here. So like if I put erode 1, then it's going to be basically like putting a 50 on the track. And if I put erode 100, it's going to be like putting a mountain climbing super bike on the track that just ruts up a trench in like 2.5 seconds. So that's kind of the difference. And I think 40 is kind of a general basis of what your average dirt bike would make rut wise on a track. So that's all you got to do. And if you already have your editor there, then you just you space and then put the dash and then you put it right there. So you're kind of like you're stacking code basically at this point, but that's kind of how you put it in the game. So not that difficult at all, but let's get back in there. So what makes it so different is the fact that you don't actually have different types of roughness and ruts in the game. For instance, like, you're not going to go to a sand track and have a certain filling and then come over here to a good traction track and have another filling. That's just not going to happen in this game. It's all the exact same type of terrain deformation, but you can change how much of it's doing, pretty much. So that's kind of the difference there. But since I left the game and came back, it scratched all of that erode that I did when I did that lap before. So let's come back in here. I'm just going to go around a couple of these corners to try to get it rutted up a little bit quicker, because if I was doing just full laps, it would actually take quite a long time with one bike, and that's something to keep in mind. It's kind of like, I feel like it's made for multiplayer in a sense, in a certain way, but it's just not optimized for multiplayer whatsoever, because there is no erode online at this point. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, when it's only a single player thing, it's kind of like it eliminates the whole purpose of it in a certain sense, because multiplayer is such a big part of this game. But okay, so let me get in here and show you guys something, because the fact that it puts so much strain on the PC. You can see that little rut right there that it made. So just doing a little bit of digging down in the dirt, but it puts so much strain on the PC just having one bike doing terrain deformation, but having like 40 bikes doing it at one time, there's just no way a computer could keep up with that. There has to be some better optimization for it in there to actually make it function properly in a multiplayer type environment. And listen, it's one thing to come in here and like just be by yourself and you're actually purposefully trying to go in these certain areas to make these ruts. That's one thing. But when you get 40 bikes going in 50 different directions on the track and they don't give a shit about making a good rut in the corner, which is what most people would be doing, they're not going to like slow down and try to make a perfect rut. You're going to have a lot more of a jambalaya going on in your corners. It's not going to look this clean right here. But if you come in here by yourself and you like purposely go through here and just get right in that rut every single time you come around, like, yeah, it's going to make some decent ruts, but don't get it twisted and think that's how it would do it if you had 40 bikes just wide open going into the corner. It's not really going to be like that. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done behind the scenes, but don't get me wrong, it does make halfway decent ruts that you can actually get into, and it's really cool to see on like custom tracks or something, especially my own custom tracks that I never expected to have ruts like that, and then all of a sudden there's ruts on the track. It is cool to see, but it's just as basic as you could possibly make a terrain deformation system. I mean, all it is doing is subtracting the terrain. That's it. It's not like making different types of roughness. It's not doing anything. There's no extra coding in there like that. It is as basic as you can make terrain deformation coating. I'm starting to develop this rut a little bit here, and it does make roughness as well. You can see right here coming up to this rut, it's actually making quite a little bit of roughness, but I've went in that same rut probably 5 times now, and it's actually starting to dig it down pretty good. But so like it's gonna make the same exact amount of like bumps through the ruts every time you do it. There is no really variation to that aspect of it. So like for instance, you're not going to be able to run through a rut, let's just say 10 or 15 times with the erode 40 on and it just be a clean rut. It's going to be a roughed up, muffed up motherfucker is what it's going to be, you know? Like within real life, if you know like any kind of local track vibe or anything, the ruts really aren't that rough like through the rut. It's actually pretty smooth. I mean, obviously you have your braking bumps coming up to the rut, but once you get in the rut, it's pretty clean through there. Maybe not on like a professional Glen Helen or something. I'm sure the ruts themselves are a lot more rough, but that's what I'm saying. It's missing that variation of types of roughness and ruts and terrain deformation in that sense. But for what it is, it's about as good as you could put a basic coating terrain deformation system. It really is about as good as you could do that in a simplistic way like this. And I mean, it's cool. I mean, go in there, mess around, play around with it. Don't get me wrong, but don't act like MX Simulator has a good terrain deformation system, because it's not even optimized. There's like no optimization to it. There's no integration really to make it work in the game properly. So it's kind of like saying, hey dudes, there's this really cool feature, but you can only use it in single player and you can't really do a whole lot more with it than that. You know, it kind of eliminates all the positive of it. And that's what I always tried to get across to people whenever I would say like, hey, you know, MX Simulator just doesn't have a very good terrain deformation system. It's got about as good as it could possibly have for the current engine, and I understand that, but when you compare it to like Reflex, it's uncomparable. Because Reflex just seems to have a like actual movement with the dirt. Like when you're going through it, the dirt moves with you and builds the ruts in that sense. And I know Reflex has the thing where the ruts can be a lot more soft and it's like hard to actually get into them. But, and I'm not saying by any means that Reflex just has a perfect terrain deformation system. I don't think any of these motocross games has a perfect terrain deformation system, but at least with Reflex, it's actually integrated and optimized in there to where you can use it in multiplayer. You can, you know, it doesn't just totally hog down the PC when you do it. So that's, if there's no optimization and there's no integration, it's kind of like it's not even in there in a sense, if that even makes any sense. And you can disagree with me there, but it's not just that aspect. I mean, it's with MX Simulator, it is how it is as well, how super basic it really is. But like I'm saying, it is fun to come on here on some of these tracks and just screw around with it. It's a fun little thing like that, but that's about all it's good for in this game. So let's see if we can try to make some different rut lines right here. I want to basically just get a good thumbnail. I'm not going to lie to you, dog. I got to get a good thumbnail over here, so I want to build a couple of rut lines. But what is cool about it, if you know you have like a pre-baked rut on a track, you can put your terrain deformation on and it will actually dig down that pre-baked rut even more so. And that was something cool that I noticed that I wasn't really anticipating beforehand. It does actually dig down your pre-baked ruts. So, you know, it doesn't just like completely jack them up. But it does dig them down. So like if you already had a couple little ruts in a corner before you even get on the track and you got the terrain deformation on, then it will just continuously dig those further and further down. So that's something to keep in mind. But you can see right here, it has actually built quite a decent line right there and a pretty cool little line off of this little thing. So it does change the track completely. It really does. Don't get like my words twisted in that sense, saying it doesn't really do anything, because if I had the erode a little bit more, it would really be doing something. But you got to understand like what I'm doing here. It's one bike, and I'm going directly in the same line every single lap. So that's why it looks the way it does. If I came through here just like a banshee and started, coming through here like a normal person would, not really worrying about going through the ruts, those ruts are going to be jacked up in about 2.5 laps. And then you're not even going to have the ruts that you had before. And then I don't really know what it does after you do it at that point. If it just like gets to a point where it's just a lot of roughness, there's really no ruts there anymore. I kind of think that's what would happen. But then you get into the aspect of like running through water. What does it really do with a water statue when you have the terrain deformation on? Now, I don't really know. Let me see if I can get around here and kind of, whoa, I've got it slicker and snot right here, so I got to be careful. Let me try to actually run some ruts through the water, and we'll see what that does. It would take you a day and a half to ever get it, especially with the erode on 40 like this. It would take you a day and a half to ever actually get it to a point where it might potentially jack up the water statue. You got a rut dug so far deep that the water's like over your head. I don't know if it starts to move the statue at that point, or if it just kind of stays in its general place. I kind of think that's maybe what it does. It just kind of stays there regardless of where the rider is. But I'm not really sure there. But yeah, if you had 40 bikes, I would definitely think you would want to lower the erode. In like a current state, you can't really run it with 40 bikes. But if it ever got to that point, I think you would really need to lower it to like erode 20 or 10 or something like that. And it would make it a lot more actually rideable. But when you're just in here by yourself, erode 40 is pretty good. E40. But yeah, so see how rough it's getting though? That's the difference, I guess, in like this and like a reflex, or what I think a terrain deformation would be. Not counting everything else I said, it's the roughness aspect of it. It just makes the same exact sort of roughness throughout the rut. And it's fun. It definitely slows the track down a crap ton, and it makes it completely different and ruddy, and like basically like an AMA style rough track in this game, like a 2016 motocross rough style track, maybe even a little bit rougher than that, to be honest. But it's not just making your smooth ruts. It just needs a lot of work, basically. That's the only explanation. And I don't think JLV can really do that with his current engine. I just don't think it's possible, because it's so basic in how the terrain is. It's just terrain. There's nothing else there. Like, you can change the slickness of the dirt and the whatever, you can make it feel like mud, make it feel like ice, make it feel like sand, whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, it is still just your tire contacting a non-movable surface. So everything's, even though you can change the like slickness of it and stuff, everything still feels the exact same as far as a contact point. You can't actually change, like the terrain can't actually move in any kind of way. It can be subtracted with the terrain deformation on, but it doesn't like slide with the tires or move with the tires like real dirt does. So that's kind of where, if they ever did make a super MX Simulator update, or like an MX Simulator 2 or something like that, they would need to integrate some sort of system that's similar to Reflex in that point, and make it to where the track creators can actually go in there and adjust all that. Like, they can pick, okay, this is going to be, it's going to make this kind of bumps, it's going to make this kind of rut, it's going to make this kind of movement with the dirt. There's got to be more options in there for the track makers with each particular track, so you can make it more like a sand track, or more like a and that's such a hard thing to explain if you don't really know motocross to a deep level, how different types of terrain, or different types of ground, I should say, is going to rut up and bump up in different ways. But in MX Simulator's current state, you can't actually change that aspect of it in any kind of way. You can just change how much it does, but that's not what I'm talking about. That's what I'm trying to get across. I'm not talking about how much it does. I'm talking about what kind of bumps and roughness. You know, like a sand track is going to have these blown out berm, more like berm ruts that have a lot of like choppy, rough bumps and stuff through them. But like a hard-packed track is not even really going to dig super deep trenches. It's just going to make like blue groove style ruts and stuff. And then if you have just a normal tacky brownie mix dirt, it's just going to make your good, smooth, solid ruts in the corners. And so that's what I'm trying to get across. You know, once that gets put into it, then that'll really, really improve it in my opinion. But you can see like that water statue right there. See how it's kind of flowing into those ruts? That's pretty cool how it did that. It seems to be working pretty well with a water statue. A lot better than I thought, but like I'm saying, if you get a ton of bikes on it, it could totally change, and that's how everything is with it. But yes, people, I do know that there's a terrain deformation system in MX Simulator. It's a goof and a gaff at this point. You know, it is really just to go in there, play around, mess around. Whenever I did my review of MX Simulator, I didn't even really mention it because it's not even really integrated into the game like it should be. And that's what I was trying to, get across in a lot of those older videos. It's just not even, it's not in there properly. Hey dudes, I just wanted to let you know that there is a link in the description to donate to me if you want to support me, and if you can't or you just don't want to, I totally understand. That's why it's completely optional, but I will be listing my top 10 donators at the end of every single future video, and I will shout out every new donator at the end of a video, even if they're not top 10. So I want to let you guys know that I have all of my different playlists on my front page, whether it be game-specific playlist or series-specific playlist. So if you're looking for any particular game or particular series that you want to watch, I have it all laid out there in a pretty organized manner on my front page. And my email address is spencerturley@live.com, no space, no capital. And I do accept sponsorship offers. And you guys should also follow me on Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, Steam, all that different stuff at Spencer Turley, no space, no capital. So anyways, I appreciate you guys watching the videos. Later, dudes.